Hello, welcome to another exciting episode of Pittsburgh Sports Memories. We'll be going over the top 10 Hall of Famers from a university that you may know or not like. I don't know. I like them. Do you like them, Tim?
I love Pitt.
All right, there you go. As you may or may not know, Pitt, the University of Pittsburgh football team, has a unusual amount of NFL Hall of Fame players from its football program. And it's actually more than some of the other storied programs that you would think of, like, I don't know, Penn State. Or I mean, even like Florida State or, some of the other schools. So on this episode, we're going to count down the top 10 Hall of Famers from that school that other schools may or may not be jealous of, and that other schools are just not willing to admit that they're really a rival to. So I want to start with the honorable mentions. So as usual, I'm Steve Ward. I'm joined with my co-host Tim Hannon,
Tim Hannon.
and we're just going to jump into the honorable mentions here. Um, Larry Fitzgerald, that guy's definitely going to be a Hall of Famer. So these are people that aren't not probably they aren't Hall of Famers yet, but they may be someday. Well, actually, what do you think, Tim? Larry Fitzgerald's in the Hall of Fame. That's like a lock.
Oh yeah, he's first ballot lock. I mean, there's no question there, but he's not eligible yet, so you got to put him in this honorable mention section.
He played for 17 seasons, first team All Pro a bunch of times. He's second in career receiving yards, and I think sixth in touchdowns. So he had a great career at Pitt. Another guy that's probably a lock for the Hall of Fame and is still playing, Aaron Donald. He's a defensive tackle now for the Los Angeles Rams. Obviously, graduated from Pitt. They had that great highlight at Pitt where he tackled the Duke running back and quarterback. I think that was Daniel Jones too. It was like they were running like an option play. Remember that? He like goes in and tackles them
Yes.
both. Just in case you decide to hand the ball off, I'll just tackle you both. Yeah, Aaron Donald was pretty good. He kind of came out of nowhere. He just had that senior year that came out of nowhere. It ended up not being a fluke. He ended up really good. He's still good. I don't think he's kind of on the backside right now. He's still a good player, but he's not where he was when they won the Super Bowl, where he literally won a Super Bowl for the Rams. I mean, Matthew Stafford played a big part, and I like Matthew Stafford. He's a good quarterback, but Aaron Donald, I've never seen a defensive player single-handedly, like literally win a Super Bowl, and that's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, definitely an all-time great and three-time defensive player of the year. I don't think anyone has won more defensive player of the year awards than he has. I think a couple of guys have also won three, but nobody's won more than
Won
three.
four, yeah.
So I mean,
And
he's in pretty select company there.
so now we get into the maybes. And I think me and Tim have debated this guy before, LaShawn McCoy, and he is 11,000 career rushing yards, and he's only 136 yards behind people that haven't murdered people. And that would be O.J. Simpson, or not, maybe not murdered people.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. People. Let's put it this way: he's 100 yards behind people that have driven white Broncos around. So
There you go.
yeah. He was named. I think he was named Player of the Decade on the All Decade team from the tens. Is that a thing? Like the 2010s. So I don't know, Tim. Do you think he'll make it?
Oh boy.
Running backs are such a dime a dozen anymore. As they're all complaining now on Facebook or whatever, whatever they're gone now, right? I don't know.
One of them social media platforms.
I
Yeah,
don't know. Kids are always on. Yeah.
running backs definitely have a problem with them. You know, they're easily disposable. I think McCoy he played a long time, so he's got that going in his favor because most running backs are done after really 4 years, 3 years in terms of productivity. And like you said, he's in the top 25 all time in yards. He's borderline. I don't know if he'll get in or not.
tried to look up how many. I don't know how. Does Jerome Bettis? Do you know how many career rushing yards Jerome Bettis has?
Uh, I don't have it in front of me. It's more than McCoy because I think Bettis might still be in the top 10. I think
Yeah,
he would,
I only have the 13. The 13th person is Edgerrin James at 12,000 yards,
yeah,
and
Bettis,
he's ahead of Marcus Allen and Franco Harris, who are both in. But that once again, both those guys played in like 14 game seasons, and
yeah,
I don't know. It's hard to compare.
it's hard to compare. A lot of the guys that are around him are also borderline on the list. Like OJ,
John Riggins is in, isn't he?
John Riggins is in, OJ
Yeah,
Simpson is in,
yeah,
Steven Jackson, Corey Dillon, and Ricky Waters are not.
yeah.
Right. So Thurman Thomas is in. He's right around that area too. So again,
But
it's
Thurman Thomas has a lot of receiving yards. I didn't look up. I think McCoy has a fair amount of receiving yards too. So
yeah, it's borderline. I don't know. I don't think he probably gets in. I think he'll be one of
he
those
has
guys.
3,000 career receiving yards. So
I think he'll be one of those guys that'll be eligible as like a senior member, like 15 years from now or something.
last guy on the honorable mentions category, Ruben Brown. He played tackle for the Bills and the Bears, I do believe. Yes, he was a 4-time All-Pro, 9-time Pro Bowl selection, 8 consecutive Pro Bowls, and that was from 96 to 2003. He's the older brother of former NFL black linebacker Cornell Brown. I don't think Ruben Brown makes it. I love Ruben Brown. He was a great player on those early 90s Pitt teams. They were really garbage. He was also in the Fugees video Killing Me Softly, which is just good for him. So
That's right.
if you remember the fight in the movie theater at the end of that video, the
Yeah,
really big guy that stands up, yes, that's an NFL tackle.
I
That's Ruben
remember
Brown.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I forgot about that. I mean, 9-time Pro Bowler though, like he should at least garner some consideration.
I don't think he makes it. I like offensive line is like almost like running back. They're just although left tackle is very like
Yeah, he's a guard. I think it's because
yeah,
he's a guard, right?
yeah,
If you're a tackle, I think
yeah.
you're more celebrated, but guards are typically not. Even Alan Faneca took him a while to get in,
What
and
about
he was a really good guard.
the guy who coaches used to coach for the Steelers, played for
Munchak,
yeah, is he in? I don't
yes.
know. Okay. And he was a guard, wasn't he? I'm pretty sure he was.
Okay. Yeah,
I
I mean,
think it
there's
yeah.
guards in there, obviously. Again, like Alan Faneca, like I said, but
Yeah.
but I don't know. I just maybe that's why he's having a hard time getting in. It'd be interesting to see it. Has he ever been a finalist or anything like that? But because he's been retired for a while now, obviously. But you're right, all four of those guys. I mean, Pitt could legitimately have 14 Hall
I
of Famers.
I think that would tie them with Ohio State or
Hmm.
Notre Dame. All right, number 10, Diaz, if you're Spanish speaking. That would be Chris Dolman. He was the 7th all-time sack leader in the NFL with 150. He's the 8th all-time sack leader at Pitt with 28, which makes absolutely no sense. Pitt has had a lot of sacks over it, especially in the last 4 or 5 years. Pitt has gotten really good at sacking the quarterback. He's Dolman finished his college career with third. He played in the Sugar Bowl, Sugar, Cotton, and Fiesta Bowl. Helped the Panthers earn 3 top 20 finishes, including a number 2 ranking in 1981. They were in the number 9 finish in 1982. He was a team captain at Pitt. The late Foge Fazio said, sometimes we'll stop the game film just to point out to the team Chris's desire and hustle to get there. He ended up being a 4th overall pick by the 85 Minnesota Vikings. He obviously played 15 seasons in the NFL. And every guy like had most of them had a pretty cool quote. Some were better than others, but so I tried to put a quote in from their enshrinement speech. I played for God, family, and teams. My teammates were very important to me, but I always knew that I wanted to honor God, and I never wanted to embarrass my family by playing bad, doing something that would bring shame to them and my teammates. I owed that to them. I owe them the best performance that I could give them week in and week out. Any thoughts on Chris Dolman there, Tim?
Yeah, like you said, him playing for the Vikings. I remember he was good. I also remember that if you picked the Vikings in the original Tecmo Bowl, he was the guy on defense he wanted to be because he was the fastest. So I do remember that about Chris Dolan. He was really good in Tecmo Bowl. But yeah, really good player at Pitt, like you said, a little bit before our times. Um, and a high draft pick that really panned out, obviously went all the way to the Hall of Fame. Hey, Steve, also just fact checking your earlier statement about um, the Hall of Fame. You were correct that if Pitt had 14, that would tie them with Notre Dame and USC for the schools with the most Hall of Famers.
Yeah.
And the only other school with more Hall of Famers than Pitt is Michigan. They have 11. So Pitt's fourth. Like you said, that's pretty amazing given that, it's
Yeah,
Pitt.
yeah, a school that size, they're not a state school. I mean, considering some of the other like super football fact, like Alabama, they have more than Alabama. That's
Yeah,
hard to,
Alabama only has 8.
yeah.
So you're
And
right.
so Pitt could put it up there by another 4, even on Alabama. Like, I mean, who from Alabama that's graduated recently is going to be a Hall of Famer? Maybe Fitzpatrick, maybe. I don't see Tua being a Hall of Famer. I mean, you never know, but so it's kind of impressive, to me, more than Texas or Alabama or Oklahoma. I
Yeah.
mean, those are absolute college football staples.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thank you for looking that up, Tim. I was remiss in my notes.
Well, you were right. You said 14. You were actually spot on. So,
Yeah, Jimbo Covert. I don't know much about Jimbo Covert. Once again, didn't really get to see him play in the 80s. He's a 6'4", 277-pound tackle. Um, he played left tackle in 11 playoff games and 3 NFC championship games and 1 Super Bowl. He of course was on that legendary 1985 Chicago Bears team that won the 15-1. That wasn't here. They're not here to cause no trouble. They're just here to do the Super Bowl shuffle, which I really wanted Jimbo Covert to be in. He did not make the cut. He was not in the Super Bowl shuffle
oh
video.
no.
Yeah, I was really sad because I really wanted to do a whole thing on the Super Bowl shuffle video, but I guess we couldn't.
So the
Since
whole team wasn't in that? I guess not, because
no, because the stupid backup quarterback was like who he mentions in his speech. Like I guess he's a big friend. I forget the name of that guy, but yeah, the backup quarterback's in it. And, I mean Richard Dent's in it, but even like Walter Payton and Jim McMahon weren't in it. Technically, they were like taped at a later time and like not Photoshop, but like edited in, I guess.
okay.
So yeah. But the '85 Bears, obviously one of the great NFL teams of all time. Yeah, sure. They are considered really
Oh
good.
yeah. I mean, that team was so dominant, and the fact that they recorded that song.
Like a month before they won the Super
Yeah.
Bowl. Yeah.
I mean, if you did that today,
Oh, people would go nuts.
people
Yeah.
would go nuts, and then every
Yeah.
team would want to beat you.
Yeah.
And then they got into the playoffs, and I don't think any of their playoff games, I don't think anybody came within 30 points of them. I mean, I'd have to look that up, and I'm pretty sure they had.
Well, the New England sure didn't. I mean,
Yeah, and they beat the Rams in the championship game, and they beat, I think it was the Giants in the divisional round, and I think they might have shut out both of those teams, or at least beat them by like 30. I mean, it wasn't so they didn't even like break a sweat to win the Super Bowl. It was amazing. They lost that one game to Miami, or else they would have been undefeated.
and yeah, the season call. We'll talk about that game against Miami later. There's another guy on this list that figures prominently with the
Uh,
'85 Chicago Bears.
I'll have to take a guess at who that is. It's
Yeah,
going to be tricky.
that should be a fun one. Covert paved the way for a 1,000-yard rusher in every season of his career but one, which that's pretty impressive. Of
Hmm.
course, that person was Walter Payton, but I you or me probably could have gotten Walter Payton 500 yards. Yeah, but you definitely, you don't. It's a team sport, and you definitely got to have some good people in front of you. He was the Miller Lite offensive lineman of the year before beer companies decided to go nuts and offend their customer base. But he earned consensus first team all Pro honors in 1985 and 1986, as well as second team in 1987. He was also an all NFC selection 4 times and named to the NFL's all decade team of the 1980s. Legendary offensive line coach Joe Moore once described him as Jimbo is so good, it's like watching a clinic film. After a play, I'm never surprised to see Jimbo and his man 10 or 15 yards downfield.
Wow.
Yeah. Jimbo's the guy we wanted from day one. We put him at left tackle and moved on. That's what coach of the Bears, Mike Ditka, said. You don't get too many people that come along who can make that kind of impact. He had the respect of all his teammates and coaches. And they asked him, well, how did rookie Covert earn the respect? And of course, in classic Mike Ditka, by kicking butt. And I'm sure Mike Ditka said butt, right, Tim? But I mean, they said that's how he did it. And he's a very quiet, he's like that stereotypical, like, offensive line guy, right? They don't talk a lot. They're kind of quiet, and they just like the great ones. They aren't a vocal like team leader. They're just the guy that leads by example, and that's kind of exactly what Jimbo Covert is, and that's who he is, and how he conducted himself. So, just an all around humble guy. A quote I picked was, I don't think I'm proven. You are only as good as your last game. I try to think of myself as steady, but there is always room for improvement. If you can't see room for improvement, it's time to get out. Speaking of people that were part of Hall of Fame offensive lines, one, Russ Grimm. He was a member of the Hogs in Washington, whatever they call in their team this week. He was a member of Russ Grimm. Getting back to Russ Grimm, he was a member of the famed 1977 recruiting class. He was Pitt's starting center. He was the heart of an impenetrable offensive line that was considered the gold standard for all of college football. Of course, blocking for Tony Dorsett kind of helps your case, you know. He helped the Panthers to a 22-2 record over the 1979 and 1980 season. How did they not win a national championship one of those years? I guess I know the one year they got blown out by Penn State.
Right,
so
right.
that didn't help.
I think that's what happened. I mean, it's college football, so it's everything's, you're
Nothing
undefeated until the third to last week of the season, then you lose, and then it doesn't matter
Yeah.
because college football is dumb. But
If you would have applied that to the 85 Bears, they would have
Right, they would, yeah.
second to the polls to the New England Patriots.
That's actually very good comparison of why college football is dumb. Anyhow,
he's just a great player. He ended up being he was a third round draft choice in Washington in 81. He started 11 seasons at guard. Hey, another guard, Tim. Yeah.
there you go.
He was part of 4 Super Bowl berths, including victories in 3 of those Super Bowls. After whatever was that Super Bowl
26.
26, yeah. One
Know your Roman
2.
numerals.
Yes, not the one eye, not 2. That's why we learned them, so we could know what Super Bowl.
That's exactly right.
Grimm announced his retirement. Who was in Super Bowl 26, Tim? Just for fun,
that would be
the Bills. Was that the Bills?
Buffalo Bills. Yeah.
Okay, all right. That was their second Super Bowl loss.
Yeah, that was not a very exciting. That was played in Minnesota too. I remember that, and that was the one where Thurman Thomas lost his helmet, and that's about the only thing.
Dallas. I thought that was the one against Dallas.
No, that was that one, and that's about the only thing I remember about.
I remember Andre Reed taking a 15-yard penalty for no reason.
Yeah, he slammed his helmet down or something. Yeah, I remember that too. Okay, so 2 things I remember about that game.
That and the coach for the Bills, like, talking trash on the Washington offensive line too. And Mark Rippon was the MVP, if I remember correctly.
The immortal Mark Rippon.
Super Bowl 26 than I.
Yeah, maybe it was a more memorable game than we thought.
Probably not. He was voted to 4 Pro Bowls, was named to the 1980s All-Decade team, and he received his Pro Football Hall of induction in 2010. He had a very good coaching career. He was the Pittsburgh Steelers assistant head coach. You ever heard of this Pittsburgh Steelers team, Tim?
Yes.
Yeah. and he was he oversaw the offensive line when they won Super Bowl 40. He kind of got caught up in that whole Steeler head coaching drama in 2009. We went over that in probably a couple different episodes. Go back and listen to that funness when he thought he had the job, but he didn't. So, good quote from Mr. Russ Grimm. I had the desire. That's all I wanted to be, a football player. A lot of guys go to college for a degree. I went to college to play football. I went to college because I had to go to college to get to the pros. To me, football is what I do best. I'm not the type of guy to sit behind a desk. Just like another Jimbo Covert kind of guy, just an offensive lineman. That's how they're just a different type of breed. They're kind of, blue collar, hardworking guys. So number 7 on this list, Ricky Jackson. Now, another guy who I really don't remember much, but I've heard of him. He collected 290 career tackles, including a team high 137. He had 137 tackles in a season in 1980. How did this 1980 team not win a medal? It's blowing my mind. When Pitt boasted the nation's top-ranked defense, except for that one time against Penn State. And who was the quarterback on that Penn State? Was it freaking Blackledge?
Probably.
Oh my gosh, they gave up 44 points to Todd Blackledge. Why? How?
Todd Blackledge, in his defense, was a really good college quarterback.
Yeah, not so much in the pros.
Maybe that's an episode we need to do, is the early 80s Pitt teams.
Yeah. In his final 2 seasons, Jackson's helped Pitt to that record. He was selected by the New York Times Computer Poll as the country's #1 team at season end. Let's see. Upon his retirement, he ranked 3rd all-time in sacks, 2nd in fumble recoveries. He made 6 trips to the Pro Bowl. He got drafted by the Saints. That's a shame because New Orleans, I was researching this, and I knew New Orleans had a good defense, but I didn't realize how good they had 4 really good linebackers. And I mean, they were called, I think he was a member of the Dome. He was a member of the Dome Patrol defense. That was their nickname. And I don't know if was there another Pitt player on that New Orleans defense? I don't think so. I don't remember. But they had 4 really good linebackers, and their defense was really good. It's just their offense was that the Wade Wilson offense, or that was their offense was not very good. He finished, actually, fun fact, in 2023, he went back and finished his degree at Pitt. So at 60 years old, I think it's a degree in communication or something. Maybe it's a degree in hitting people. I don't know. He won a Super Bowl with San Francisco in '94 later in his career. There's all kinds of NFL film highlights of Ricky Jackson. They're pretty cool. Football is the reason for everything I've ever been able to have. That's why it's so important to me. It's everything to me. Moving on to number 6, and I don't know if we've talked about him before. He's definitely before me and Tim. I think Tim saw him. Tim was around and saw him way back when. Joe Schmidt.
Oh yeah, I love Joe Schmidt. He was great back when I was a young lad.
Yeah. He was a hard-nosed linebacker from Pitt. He was injured a lot at Pitt, so he didn't play a terrible amount, but he did make first-team All-American in his senior year. So this was when, in the 50s, they were kind of switching. The NFL was switching from straight running all the time to more of a passing league. And so the defenses switched from a 5-man front. I remember this in Dan Rooney's book, him talking about this, till the 4-3 became the primary defense in the NFL, because it would get the ability to stop the pass, because you needed that extra defensive back, I guess. So, and Joe Schmidt was the guy that kind of developed the inside linebacker role. Before that, there wasn't one, because they played 5-man lines. So, fun fact in NFL history, he was he played with Dick LeBeau, and he was a deadly tackler. He was very, very good. He was a very smart football player, and they beat the Browns in was that the 50 it was like the 52 championship when the Lions won the. Yeah, can you believe that the Lions and the Browns played in the championship game? Imagine if that was a Super Bowl.
Very different era.
Yeah. And the Browns were stacked. They had Otto Graham and Jim Brown, and Paul Brown was their coach, and Joe Schmidt and Dick LeBeau, and I don't know if Night Train Lane was on that team too, but
that was Buddy Parker. We talked about him in one of our
was that
shows.
Buddy Parker was the coach of that team? Yeah, the Lions were really good then, so before it all kind of fell apart. So, but he was just really good. Have we done the Joe Schmidt trio? I think we did. In our music episode, did we do the Joe Schmidt trio?
I don't think so. I'm not sure what that is.
All right, hey, for your listening pleasure, the Joe Schmidt trio.
Once I had a girl of my own, but now she's gone. The grapes so red will leave you hanging on the vine. The grapes of wrath will leave you lonesome all the time. I had a girl who loved me, thought her love was true. Now I sit and cry, drink the wine all night. Grapes of wrath are you. She went away.
Well, I think we get the gist of that, huh? So NFL Films named him 84 of all time. I guess they did a top 100 of all time, which he was actually presented by what's his name? Jerry Glanville. I don't know why Jerry Glanville. I don't know if Jerry Glanville was on these Lions or what. But that was at 50. It was the 1957 NFL championship game, and that was when they switched to the 4-3, and that was Buddy Parker. Was Bobby Lane? I don't know if Bobby Lane was their quarterback.
He was.
Okay, awesome. So moving on to number 5, we're halfway through this. My favorite, probably Pitt player and football player. One of my favorites. I don't know. It's tough. This is like picking between my kids here, but definitely like the guy I really liked growing up, Mr. Curtis Martin, and he's just a great player and a better person apparently. Very good. I really liked his quote here. Is probably my favorite. I did not have a quote for Joe Schmidt. I'm sorry. So Curtis Martin was he played his big game was the 251 yards against Texas in the opening game in '94, and then he didn't play the rest of the season. He got hurt. But he still was a draft pick by the Patriots in the 3rd round, and he ended up having like a really great career. He has 14,000 rushing yards. He started his NFL career with 10 consecutive 1,000 yards rushing. He was an NFL rushing champion with 1,697 yards in 2004. He's been a Pro Bowler 5 times. He's just, a really good player. At Pitt, he was really the only thing they had once again. Well, I don't know if they had Reuben Brown and him played at the same time. Did they? I think they did.
Yeah, early 90s, yeah.
Yeah. So he was just very consistent in the NFL. He was a very good player. It's a shame he got the one Super Bowl. He played in one Super Bowl with the Patriots. And I forget his stats, but he had a good Super Bowl. It's just they came up, Green Bay was just a little better. So he played in New York too for a long time. Well, I have to highlight the whole first half of the 250 yards against the 94 Texas game. And I was actually at that game. I remember that game. His NFL Hall of Fame speech is like considered legendary. And this is a good quote. I really liked Curtis Martin's quote here. It's not what you achieve in life, but who you become as a person due to those achievements. And I think that's a great quote by Curtis Martin. The best thing that ever happened to Curtis Martin was Bill Parcells. Even Johnny Majors tried to reel him in, but he didn't really listen to him. And I think he listened more to. He actually wrote a letter to Johnny Majors. Remember that later, apologizing for not playing harder in his college, and then Parcells really, I think, made him into the man he has become. And good for Curtis Martin, and he's really ended up like, and his life has been, he had a rough life. I think somebody like he got held up at gunpoint when he was in his teen years, and like they pulled the trigger and the gun didn't go off, and then like they pointed the gun away and then pulled it and the gun went off. So I mean, he grew up in the Hill District, which is not the greatest neighborhood in Pittsburgh, and he just had a tough one. He graduated from Alderdice, the city school, and just amazing what can happen when somebody really turns their life around, and good for him, and he really accomplished a lot.
I'm with you. He's one of my favorite players of all time. Steve and I sat at a lot of games at Pitt Stadium in like 1993, where literally, I mean, if you go look up the scores from that year, I mean, it was like 72-14, 65-7, right? It was like literally like those were the scores of these schools just coming in and just blowing away Pitt. Pitt was so bad, but you would stay even when Pitt was 30 points down, you would stay just to see Curtis Martin rip off a long run. He was just so fun to watch, so good. I was so happy that his NFL career pan out the way it did, because when he was a third round pick, there was really no guarantee he was really going to get on the field. And of course he did, became very successful, won the rushing title in his 10th season. We were just talking about how running backs are a dime a dozen and they don't last very long. He won the rushing title in his 10th season. That's amazing.
All right, next up, I'm not even going to introduce this guy. I'm going to let this guy's highlights introduce this guy.
They win the top place.
It goes inside to 30, picked up on the bounce there by Revis. He's giving ground. He gets a block, turns the corner at the 20. He's at the 25, and he's knocked out of bounds. Oh, he's coming up the sideline. Here he comes to the 50, and he's going down the field. He's got inside the 25, still on his feet, inside the 20, still on his feet, and he's in the end zone for a touchdown.
Well, if you don't know what that was Darrelle Revis's punt return against WVU way back when. And I mean, my goodness, Darrelle Revis, just like one of the best players at Pitt. Started as a freshman, which is rare. I mean, if you name the people who started it as a freshman, there aren't a lot. I mean, let's see, Curtis Martin, Larry Fitzgerald, Darrelle Revis. Yeah, 3 of those guys are in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. So, I mean, he was really good. He returned up that big punt. Pitt still lost that game. They still ended up getting blown out. That was in, what year was it? Was that 2006? 2006, yeah. He had a great career. He had that big tackle in 2004. I think we talked about that we did a 2004 season, and he had a big tackle on the Boston College player on a 4th and goal. And that was his freshman year. So just Darrelle Revis, Super Bowl player from Aliquippa, another person. We have a couple people from Aliquippa on this list. He's the first of 3, I do believe. And, now is he good? Revis Island, he got nicknamed. He had a 100-yard interception against the Dolphins. I guess if you want to go and watch that, that'll be fun. But best corner ever to play for Pitt, probably Tim, right?
Oh yeah, I think so. He was a guy. What I always remember about Darrelle Revis was, if you, one cool thing about if you go to a sporting event as opposed to watching it on TV is you can kind of watch anything you want, right? When you're watching a football game on TV, you have to watch what they're showing you. And I remember the opener in 2006, they were playing Virginia.
I remember that game.
Yeah. And I remember it was at Heinz Field. And when Virginia had the ball, I would just watch Revis. I just watched Revis cover somebody, and they avoided him the entire game. I mean, they just would not throw to whatever receiver he was covering. They just were like, nope, not going to throw over there. And then finally, in like the third quarter, the quarterback's like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to take a chance. And Revis picked them off. It was just,
and I was watching it for a touchdown.
I believe so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I was on that end zone. That was in the end zone I was sitting
Yes.
in. Yeah,
Yeah. And it was just, that was how good he was. It was just fun to watch him cover people. I can't say that about any other player that I've watched on defense where I'm just like, I'm just going to watch him the whole time. And that's how dominant he was at Pitt. And then of course in the NFL, yeah, he was great too. One of the biggest disappointments ever was that in the 2007 draft, the Steelers kind of needed a cornerback that year, and they were 2 picks away, and the Jets traded up to the pick in front of them and took Revis. And I don't know if the Steelers were going to take him or not, but we never found out because the Jets traded up right in front of us and took him. And I just thought, man, we could have had Darrelle Revis. We were that close. I think the reason they didn't win that third Super Bowl, if you had to boil it down to one thing, is because they did not have a good did not have a good pass defense that year, and Aaron Rodgers carved them up in that Super Bowl, as did Tom Brady and Drew Brees and a bunch of other guys earlier that season. And you just wonder if they would have had Revis for that game, does that turn out differently? Again, lots of what ifs, but great player for sure.
But one of my favorites, very good player, and good for Darrelle Revis. And so the next person, number 3 on our list, I will let another person, I'll play their highlight before I introduce them.
What do you want to know? Come on, or I'm going to go in now. So if you don't, what doesn't matter which one run. There'll be a quarterback that'll be named next week. That'll be the starter. There's 3 quarterbacks on this football team. Whichever one starts. Whichever ones don't, will back him up. Period. Cut and dried. It's nobody's concern but ours. Nobody's. Next.
Injuries from the game.
Talk to the trainer. Next.
Mike, why are you in such a bad mood?
What do you care?
Good.
Okay. If you were 2-7, you'd be in a bad mood too. What next?
Mike, is this more like a training camp type practice as opposed to a regular season?
Yes. Next. Not very much fun, is it? No?
Not at all.
All right. I'll see you guys.
Now that's the way to have a post game.
I was just thinking the other day, I so miss, because everybody's so media conscious now. I just miss that era of NFL coaches and personalities like that. Like you had Ditka, you had Sam Weiss and Jerry Glanville and Buddy Ryan, and you just had all these big personalities, Parcells, guys that would just yell and scream, and Jim Mora, remember from the Saints, that guy.
Yeah.
I mean, you just don't.
Called the Saint fans like bums like one time.
Yeah, he had the playoffs rant.
Yeah.
So you just don't have that anymore.
We didn't do diddly poo.
Right. Right. That's a bygone era, because now I don't think you'd ever hire a guy like that, because again, everybody's so media conscious and everything else, and image conscious.
So Iron Mike, he was the number 1 draft pick of the Bears in 1961. And he actually was the first pass catching tight end, which is weird because he played defensive end at Pitt. He was a very good defensive end at Pitt. So, oh man, I don't even know where to begin with the career of one Mike Ditka. Well, I guess he was the head coach of the Bears and Saints after he finished his career. He actually won a Super Bowl with the Cowboys at tight end. Stuff Mike Ditka's done for 100, Alex. Traded his whole draft for Ricky Williams. Remember the game we were talking about? He was the coach of the '85 Bears. Him and Buddy Ryan, who, another character who would never get hired in today's NFL. So at halftime, Marino's carving up the 46 defense because, blitzing Marino every play probably isn't a smart thing to do. So I think Ditka wanted Ryan to change his defense, and Buddy wouldn't. So they got in a fist fight in the shower during the halftime of that game. And that's a true story.
That's amazing. That's just amazing. Again, you just never see that anymore. Something like that.
Yeah, the '85 Bears were dysfunctional but successful. He rotated quarterbacks between Mike Tomczak and Doug Flutie. Do you remember with the Bears? And after when I think McMahon was hurt, but he's been in many movies. He was in Brian's song. I didn't know that. And Not So Seriously, Kicking and Screaming. He actually played at Pitt from 1958 to 1960. He was a 3-sport athlete. He played baseball and was on the basketball team. Can you imagine playing Mike Ditka in basketball?
I bet he threw his elbows around a lot.
Bob Timmons, the coach, both Ditka in football and basketball, said he'll hit the first guy he sees, and that was in both sports. He was also an intramural wrestling champion at Pitt. He was the coach at Pitt. The wrestling coach was convinced Ditka could have been an NCAA wrestling champion had he wrestled on the varsity. He was a tenacious and incendiary competitor. He was not diplomatic. Yeah, that's no clue. During a bowl game, he was not a well-mannered. Somebody did something wrong near the end of first half during a Michigan State game, and this is from an excerpt from Jim O'Brien and Hail to Pitt. Some guy named Reinhold did something wrong and allowed Michigan State to Herb Adderley escaped his grasp and go for a touchdown. This guy said, "Let's get him in the second half." And Ditka cried out, "If you hadn't given up that touchdown in the first half, we wouldn't be in the fix we're in." With that, he went for this Reinhold guy. It took about 6 teammates to restrain Ditka. His last game against Penn State will always stand out in my mind, said Lou Ciccione, running back for Pitt. He went in to block a punt, and then the played the whole game with a dislocated shoulder. Jeez.
Wow.
Another great Foge quote. You'd see him in the huddle or on the sidelines wanting to get back on the field, and you knew just by looking at him he was ready. Remembers Foge. He was always ready. He was like a prize fighter in the ring. He couldn't wait for that bell to ring and get back out there. So Ditka, very accomplished and deserving. I put him at number 3 just because the other 2 guys are really good, but probably, he had a good playing career, but his coaching career probably put him over the top, and that's why he's in the NFL Hall of Fame. And he, like I said, he did kind of revolutionize the tight end position. Although I would think John Mackey for the Colts probably was more responsible for that than Ditka. But any other thoughts on good old Iron Mike there? Another guy from Aliquippa, the second of our 3 people from Aliquippa on this list.
No, just again, miss him being in the NFL.
Not a lot of fun, is it?
Not a lot of fun without him.
So, number 2 on our list was Mr. Dan Marino. Probably, well, not probably. The best quote was by a Florida State coach, Bobby Bowden. He said, "He's a pro quarterback in college, really. And he's the best quarterback to play for Pitt, right? It's probably not even close." Right, Tim?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Kenny Pickett certainly did a lot, especially his senior season, but you'd still put Marino in front of him. And I don't even know who else you would put on there. I guess what's his name? Wanstead's offensive coordinator for the guy that was a 76 quarterback. Kavanaugh, yeah. I couldn't remember his name.
Right,
I mean, that was more of...
Come on, Rod Rutherford doesn't make the list.
Yeah. I mean, Kavanaugh, that was more of the guy that you're probably going to put at number 1 on that team. So, you're right. He's the best.
He actually had a Major League Baseball prospect. It was as a pitcher and a shortstop. He was drafted in the 4th round in '79 by the Kansas City Royals.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He led the Pitt in all-time passing when he graduated with 8,597 and 79 touchdowns. In the NFL, I think I've quoted his. I know we did another podcast where I covered some of these guys like Revis and Marino, but he had 13 3,000-yard seasons. That's crazy. 61,000 passing yards, 9 Pro Bowls, 420 touchdowns, which how many does Brady have? 500 and some now? Yeah. So Marino really didn't have a quote for Marino, but he says, looking back on my career, I've accomplished many things, but what I cherish more than any record that I hold, any fourth quarter comeback, any win that I was involved in, what I cherish more are the relationships that I've made, the people I've worked with, the teammates I've lined up beside, the opponents that I've competed against, the friends and family. That's what I cherish most. And here's a play from Marino's. It's kind of become legendary.
Second down and 1 at the 18-yard line. And Marino completes inside the 10. Has a first down. Ingram again. Stopped by Glenn.
He's going to spike it, kid.
Everybody on the line of scrimmage. Now, he still has 1 timeout. They'll save that for the field goal if they have to.
We are seeing another spectacular effort by Marino, who fires. Touchdown!
You know what the Jets were thinking? He's going to take the ball and throw it into the ground.
They stopped.
They all stopped. If you take a look at it, the offensive linemen, all they did was stand up. And Marino says to Ingram, I mean, that's the communication that they have. We saw Fryer on the 2-point conversion tell Marino from the back of his hand, hey, throw the ball to me. Now, here's Ingram for his 4th touchdown. This is a beautiful play.
Yeah, you're right. It has become a legendary play. I mean, that won them that game, and, figures it was the Jets because it's the most Jets thing to do ever is stand there while Dan Marino wins the game.
And I think Marino, like, his career against the Jets is like all time too, because he always kind of had a thing because like the Jets were supposed to draft him and they drafted Ken O'Brien instead, and he was always kind of mad about that. So he really took it out on the Jets. So although Ken O'Brien had a decent career, he wasn't exactly Dan Marino.
I feel like Marino really ushered in the modern era of passing, right? Like you certainly had guys putting up some numbers before that, but it's like when he started putting up, 50 touchdown seasons and all that kind of stuff, that was really when you started seeing stuff like that on a regular basis. It wasn't really until him. So his NFL career was pretty remarkable, except of course, that he never won a Super Bowl.
Well, moving on to our final and top spot of all time. I don't think it's any secret who's left. Our last person from Aliquippa, completing the Aliquippa trifecta, that would be one Tony. Is it Dorsett or Dorset?
Depends what time frame you're talking about.
And believe it or not, he's Pitt football's only Heisman Trophy winner. So,
oh, wow.
Don't worry, Jim Brown didn't win one either. So I think that says all you need to know about the Heisman Trophy. Jim Brown did not win the Heisman Trophy. They gave it to Paul Hornung on a 6-6 Notre Dame team. What a joke. I have no respect for that reward. I mean, I'm glad he wore it, but who cares? There have been so many other great players that may or may not be in the honorable mention section of this list that didn't win it. So
right. We've talked about that before. The Jason White winning over Larry was, to me, that just invalidated the whole thing. Like I think
what invalidated was Jim Brown not winning it. And that's
sure.
And you can say, oh, that was the 60s. It was a different time. And, there were some other factors going on there. But then why do we pay attention to it? I'm with Mario Lemieux. Anything that's voted on doesn't matter, in my opinion. If you have to vote on it, then, I guess the
flawed.
NFL Hall of Fame is a voted on process. So, I guess maybe
you
this
just
whole
invalidated your whole episode.
Yeah. But, what should we just always just, have like, would that be something if we had like a soccer style relegation and promotion in the like Hall of Fame? Like, okay, you now we only are going to let the top 5 stats guy, because then you just have like a bunch of people that had a bunch of stats if you just took purely subjective, and how do you quantify like you said, a guard? Oh, he really blocked really well. His running backs had a yards per carry of
and then you would get into era problems because John Stallworth and Lynn Swan would have never made it because their
Didn't throw
numbers,
the ball, yeah.
their numbers look terrible compared to even like a Heinz Ward or even like a borderline receiver from today, right?
Yeah.
Would be way better. We talked about this once before. The LPGA, the ladies golf whatever tour association, their Hall of Fame is there's a very statistical method to get in. They think they award like points, so they have to have had like an LPGA major. They had to have had X amount of tournament wins or whatever, right? And then they even get points for Olympic medals, gold medals. So that is one way to do it. You could do it like that, where you have like a quantifiable statistical thing. But again, there's way too many problems with that. And then you'd have, like you said, Steve, you'd have people with big stats. I mean, remember Jeff George? Remember that?
Yeah,
guy?
he is. Yeah,
He had 4,000-yard passing seasons when he played for the Falcons or Colts or Vikings. I can't remember all the teams he played for. But he's not a Hall of Fame quarterback. He's not even close. But if you were just going based off of stats, right? So it's there's no good answer, I guess, is what we're saying.
Oh, I call that too the fantasy football effect. Like people be like, oh, this guy's really good. And then you watch him play. It's like, I don't know. He never does. Like, it's like Antonio Brown. Like, I would totally eliminate any of those stupid catches he had at the end of the half where he just ran for 40 yards. It was 40 meaningless yards. You didn't get a points out of it. You weren't even trying to score. You were just padding your stats. And he's the classic example. And guys do that all the time. Like, just get an extra catch or whatever. Now, for him, he wasn't caring about the Hall of Fame. It was in his contract, and that's how he got paid. And I guess good for him. Sure. Whatever. So getting back to Tony Dorsett, he was 1973. He was very skinny, but he was very fast, and he could really see. He had a very good vision. So in his 4-year career with the Panthers, he tied 18 collegiate rushing records, more than any other player in the history of college football. He established the all-time career rushing record with 6,000, and that stood for 22 years until, was that Ron Dane or Ricky Williams that broke that?
Oh, yeah. It's one of those two.
One of the guys who, maybe it was the guy who Ditka didn't trade all his draft picks for. I don't know. He was the first major college back to compile 4 1,000-yard seasons. He became the first freshman consensus All-American since 1944. He was the first sophomore ever named to the Playboy All-American team. Did he have to do like a spread, like naked, like Burt Reynolds? Well, that was Playgirl. Burt Reynolds. You know that Burt Reynolds like a Playgirl center.
I've never read that issue, Steve. I'm sorry to say.
I will send you the picture. It's hilarious.
I will pass.
You will watch it. As a junior, he impressed for 1,500 yards, including a memorable 300 yards against Notre Dame.
My goodness.
I think that was the infamous game. I know we talked about this in an episode where like Notre Dame tried to grow the grass long and like water it down. Like, we're going to slow him down. And that didn't work. So his quote was, to be a running back in this league at 183 pounds, sometimes I wonder how I played this long. I'm the second leading rusher, and at that time when he retired, and I played 12 seasons when at one point I thought I would only play 5. When I leaf through the pages of my scrapbook someday, I could smile about what I have done. We'll have some highlights of John Facenda highlights, and then there's one cool. We also have Danny White talking about Tony Dorsett, which is just hilarious. They hear the former Dallas Cowboys punter / quarterback. Who takes their punter, their quarterback? Only Dallas. But here's a good one. Maybe this one won't get rejected by the NFL. Oh, that one got rejected.
It's because you keep clicking on the video. Don't click on the video. Click on the title. See where
like this.
Yep.
Okay. Yep,
there you go.
To choose this life over friends, over family, and we never quit.
I see you like to play with knives. Well, I ain't playing no more.
Expendable 7, rated R.
Another one. I hope they didn't put music over this. I don't think they did. I hate when they do that. Oh my gosh, stop. Gosh. Like, really? Well, we just can't.
Goal line defense for the Vikings.
Okay.
Goal line defense for the Vikings. The handoff, Dorsett up the middle. Here he goes. Cuts to his right. Going all the way. To the 30. To the 40. He's got 2 men to beat. To the 40. To the 30. To the 20. To the 10. To 5. Touchdown! Unbelievable! Tony Dorsett is in the record books. 99 yards.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool 99-yard run by Tony Dorsett, whatever his name is this week. Greatest Pitt player ever, Tim? Probably.
Yeah, you can't argue with that. Also been a really great ambassador for the university.
I did
all
have
these years
highlights of
later.
him yelling at James Franklin after Pitt beat them in 2016. Remember that? Like, he
Yes.
was obviously had a few adult beverages. It was just hilarious. He wasn't yelling at him. He was just like, "Hell to Pitt!" Like right during their press conference. So I love, that's why. Yeah, that's another great reason. Like you said, that's that's the most Pitt thing to do. Like harass Penn State during the press conference. And,
Yeah, definitely an all-time great Pitt player, great NFL career. Unfortunately with the Cowboys, but great NFL career anyway.
he had a pretty
I mean,
good Super Bowl against the Steelers, even like.
well, I keep saying we have to do an episode on the 78 Steelers. And when we do, one of the things I want to get into is Tony Dorsett really believes that they win that game if they keep running the ball. They were really having a lot of success.
Yeah.
They actually had an early first half lead in that game. And then they kind of shifted things on offense, and then the Steelers came back. So that'd be an interesting theory to delve into. But yeah, he was a dominant player. And it was one of those weird things where, like, how did the Cowboys get Tony Dorsett? Because they were like the best team of the 70s. One of the best teams, not the best, obviously, because that was here. But, how did they get the best college player? They must have had.
I think they made a trade or something.
Yeah, it was one of those, like, somebody had traded them their number 1 pick like 2 years earlier, and then that team just happened to stink.
Yeah.
Right. It was one of those kinds of, like, Tony Dorsett just fell into their lap. So kind of like what happened with the Eagles this past year, where they had like a top 5 pick, even though they were in the Super Bowl. Right. So sometimes you just luck out in those kinds of scenarios.
Well, if you disagree with my list or anything like that, send all your complaints to Tim Hannon at timhannon.com. He doesn't have his own website, but no, I mean, you could probably debate, like, who's the best. Maybe Ditka's the better because he was a coach longer, but I don't know. Those top 3, it's pretty tough to pick from Marino or Dorsett or Ditka. So I hope you enjoyed our podcast today, and you can always check us out on all our streaming services such as Spotify and all the rest. I always mention Spotify because that's the one I use, but there's lots more too. And you can check out our website, PittsburghSportsMemories.com. All the links to everybody's highlights. There's going to be way more. This episode is going to have a lot of notes, a lot of highlights to it. So go check those out if you're interested in, like, watching, like I said, Russ Grimm block people. Or else there's a lot of other good stuff on there. There's Jerry Glanville talking about what's his name, Joe Schmidt. And I'm sure if you like really wanted to hear the rest of the Joe Schmidt trio song, you can listen to that too. Or we can play it on the outro. Maybe we'll hit it on the outro here. All right. Well, thank you again. Thanks for listening. Word of mouth is great. We just appreciate every listener we get, and say hi to all the people in Australia that have been listening. Apparently, g'day, mate. All right. We'll see you next time on another episode of Pittsburgh Sports Memories.
Once I had a girl of my own, but now she's gone.
Kind of
The grapes are red.